How did the weight of steel? The FN Minimi felt wrong in Jake McNiece's hands, its unfamiliar weight throwing off the rhythm he'd learned with American weapons. 3 days after D-Day, nothing about Normandy matched the briefings back in England. The medieval stone bridge spanning the Douve River should have been a simple demolition job. Wire the spans, blow the charges, deny German armor a crossing. Instead, McNiece found himself clutching a captured Belgian machine gun while his men worked frantically behind him, their voices echoing off ancient stonework that seemed built to outlast wars. "DiMarzio, how much longer on those charges?" McNiece called, not taking his eyes off the tree line across the river. 10 minutes, Sarge. Maybe 15. This stone's thicker than we thought." The TNT satchel beside McNiece contained their last reliable explosives, enough for one perfect shot at the bridge's critical stress points, but only if they could position the charges exactly right. The detonation cord snaking from his position to the bridge pylons represented weeks of careful hoarding, scrounged from mist-dropped supply crates and sympathetic engineers. Every foot of that cord mattered now. Through the morning fog drifting across Norman hedgerows, McNiece spotted movement. German patrols probing the approaches, testing for weakness. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment had scattered across 20 square miles during the night drop, leaving isolated squads to improvise missions that required full companies. McNiece's handful of filthy 13 paratroopers represented the only demolition capability between this bridge and 3 tank-accessible roads leading toward Utah Beach. The Minimi's alien mechanics reminded him of everything chaotic about their situation. Captured from an overturned German supply truck, the weapon gave them firepower but demanded precious ammunition they couldn't replace. Each burst had to count, each tactical decision balanced against dwindling resources and mounting pressure from enemy forces that seemed to multiply with each passing hour. Private Bielski emerged from beneath the bridge span, his uniform caked with mud and stone dust. "Sarge, we can blow the North Pier clean, but the south side needs another 20 pounds of TNT to guarantee a complete drop." McNiece hefted the satchel, feeling its weight against his ribs. 20 pounds they didn't have. 20 pounds, that might mean the difference between stopping enemy armor and watching it roll through toward the beachhead, where thousands of American soldiers remained vulnerable. The morning silence carried sounds that made McNiece's stomach clench. Distant engine noise, the metallic grinding of tracked vehicles moving through Norman villages, German reinforcements approaching the river, drawn by reports of scattered paratroopers and damaged infrastructure, time compressed into heartbeats, each second bringing enemy armor closer to a crossing his undermanned squad might not be able to deny. "We make do with what we have," McNiece decided, though the tactical mathematics looked grim. One satchel, limited cord, and a captured machine gun against unknown numbers of German forces converging on their position. The weight of command settled across his shoulders like wet wool. Behind him, exhausted paratroopers worked with tools and explosives that fell short of the mission requirements. Ahead, enemy movement increased through hedgerows and farm buildings that offered perfect concealment for advancing infantry. The bridge itself, a stone monument to medieval engineering, mocked their modern explosives with its massive foundations and redundant structural supports. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The first German probe came at 0847 hours. 8 soldiers moving carefully along the riverbank, while machine gun teams established overwatch from concealed positions in the village across the water. McNiece tracked their movement through field glasses, noting the disciplined spacing and coordinated advance that marked veteran infantry. These weren't green conscripts fumbling through unfamiliar terrain. They moved like men who understood the tactical value of river crossings and the urgency of securing them before Allied forces could organize effective resistance. "Contact, 200 meters northwest," McNiece whispered into his radio, though he wondered if anyone remained close enough to respond. The scattered drop had left communication networks shattered across the Norman countryside. Behind him, DiMarzio and Bielski worked with increasing desperation to position charges that might bring down enough of the bridge to deny it to German armor. The ancient stonework absorbed their efforts like a sponge, requiring precise placement and perfect timing to achieve catastrophic structural failure. Military engineering manuals assumed access to unlimited explosives and ideal working conditions. Reality offered a single TNT satchel and German patrols closing from 3 directions. The Minimi's first burst surprised even McNiece with its accuracy, dropping the German point man and scattering his squad into whatever cover they could find among the hedgerows. But the weapon's unfamiliar recoil pattern reminded him that every advantage came with corresponding vulnerability. Captured equipment meant limited ammunition, uncertain reliability, and the constant risk of being mistaken for enemy forces by approaching Allied units. Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackled through the radio static. "McNiece, higher command wants that bridge held intact for our own armor advance. Delay demolition until further orders." The contradiction hit like a physical blow. Hold the bridge for Allied tanks that might arrive in hours or days, while German armor approached within minutes. McNiece studied the tactical situation through his field glasses, counting muzzle flashes and estimating enemy strength. 2 machine gun positions, at least a dozen riflemen, and the rumble of heavier vehicles somewhere beyond the village suggested forces far exceeding his squad's ability to resist. "Sir, we've got German armor movement to the north. If we don't drop this bridge now, they'll roll right through us." "Orders stand, Sergeant. Hold position and prepare for relief." Bielski caught McNiece's expression and shook his head slightly. They both understood the mathematics of their situation. 4 exhausted paratroopers with limited ammunition against growing enemy pressure, ordered to preserve the very target that represented their only tactical advantage. The detonation cord snaked across wet stones like an accusation, connecting McNiece's position to charges that could solve their immediate problem while creating larger strategic complications. The second German probe revealed their true intentions. Instead of direct assault, they maneuvered to establish crossfire positions that would interdict the bridge approaches while keeping the structure intact. Standard tactics for securing river crossings contain defending forces, prevent demolition, hold the span for friendly armor exploitation. McNiece felt sweat mixing with cordite residue on his hands as he gripped the Minimi. Every tactical instinct screamed for immediate bridge destruction, but military discipline demanded obedience to orders that might doom his entire squad. The weight of the TNT satchel pressed against his hip, a constant reminder of choices that could save lives or destroy them. Corporal Hayes appeared at McNiece's elbow, his face pale beneath accumulated grime. "Sarge, I count at least 20 Germans in the village, and there's definitely armor moving up the main road. We blow this thing now, or we don't get another chance." The sound of steel on stone echoed from the village, tank treads grinding across cobblestones, growing louder with each passing minute. McNiece closed his eyes and tried to calculate time and distance, weighing the lives of his 4 men against strategic objectives he couldn't fully understand. The German tank appeared through the village smoke at 09:23 hours, its turret traversing slowly as it searched for targets among the Norman hedgerows. A Panzer IV, McNiece realized. Not the heaviest armor in the German inventory, but more than sufficient to crush any resistance his scattered squad could offer. The tactical equation shifted from difficult to impossible in the space of a heartbeat. "Jesus Christ," DiMarzio breathed, his hands freezing on the detonation cord connections. "They're bringing up armor." Behind them, the ancient bridge offered protection from direct fire, but no escape route if German forces secured both ends of the span. McNiece felt the weight of command settling like a physical burden across his shoulders. 4 men, limited ammunition, and orders that made less sense with each passing minute. The TNT satchel contained enough explosive power to drop the bridge cleanly. denying German armor access to roads leading directly toward Utah Beach and the thousands of Allied soldiers still fighting to expand their tenuous foothold in Normandy. Radio static brought fragments of reports from other scattered units, ambushes in hedgerows, failed rendezvous with mist-dropped supply crates, desperate holding actions at crossroads and canal bridges throughout the 506th assigned sector. The night drop had shattered the regiment's cohesion, leaving individual squads to improvise missions designed for full companies with extensive support. Lieutenant Morrison's voice cut through the radio noise. All units, be advised, friendly armor is moving up from the beach. Maintain bridge integrity at all costs. McNiece studied the German tank through his field glasses, noting the methodical way its commander surveyed approach routes and potential firing positions. Professional soldiers executing standard tactics, secure the crossing, establish overwatch, prepare for exploitation by follow-on forces. The Panzer's presence transformed the tactical situation from containment to active threat elimination. "Sarge, what do we do?" Bielski asked, though his expression suggested he already understood their limited options. The detonation cord stretched like a lifeline between McNiece's position and the bridge pylons, where carefully placed charges waited for the electrical impulse that would bring down centuries of stone engineering in seconds. Military discipline demanded obedience to orders, but tactical reality suggested that following those orders might cost lives throughout the sector. Private Hayes pointed toward movement in the tree line north of the village. "More infantry coming up. Looks like a full company, maybe more." McNiece felt something cold settle in his stomach as he counted enemy forces converging on their position. The Minimi offered limited defensive capability against coordinated assault, especially with German armor providing direct fire support. Each burst from the captured machine gun announced their position while consuming ammunition they couldn't replace. The weight of the TNT satchel pressed against his hip like a reminder of choices that couldn't be undone once made. Blow the bridge and save his men, while potentially condemning Allied armor to longer, more dangerous approach routes. Hold the span and risk German forces securing it for their own exploitation toward the vulnerable beachhead. Through the morning fog, McNiece heard the distinctive sound of more tracked vehicles approaching, the mechanical grinding of steel on stone that announced armored reinforcements moving to exploit any tactical advantage German infantry could secure. The bridge beneath his feet hummed slightly with vibrations from the Panzer's engine, a reminder that medieval engineering had never been designed to support modern warfare's massive mechanical loads. "DiMarzio, how long to finish the wiring?" 2 minutes, Sarge, maybe less." McNiece closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining his decisions to the widows of men who died because he chose wrong. The radio crackled with distant voices, other scattered squads reporting contact, requesting support, describing tactical situations that sounded as desperate as his own. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The German assault began with machine gun fire that chipped ancient stone from the bridge pylons, sending sharp fragments ricocheting across the span where McNiece's men worked frantically to complete their demolition preparations. The Panzer IV had positioned itself to provide overwatch, while infantry maneuvered through hedgerows on both flanks, a textbook river-crossing operation executed with mechanical precision. McNiece gripped the Minimi and felt its alien weight settle into his hands as muscle memory fought against unfamiliar mechanics. The captured weapon represented everything chaotic about their situation. Powerful but unpredictable, effective but dangerous to those who wielded it. Each burst had to count, not just for tactical effect, but because ammunition represented a finite resource that diminished with every trigger pull. "Charges set!" DiMarzio shouted from beneath the bridge span, his voice barely audible over the crescendo of German small arms fire. "Ready to blow on your word!" The detonation cord snaked across wet stones like a physical manifestation of McNiece's dilemma. One electrical impulse would bring down the bridge, denying German armor access to critical roads while potentially condemning Allied forces to longer, more dangerous approach routes. The weight of command settled across his shoulders like wet wool, each second of delay increasing the risk to his men while complicating larger strategic calculations he couldn't fully understand. Through his field glasses, McNiece counted muzzle flashes and estimated enemy strength. At least 30 German soldiers, maneuvering for position, with armor support and obvious coordination, suggesting veteran units rather than hastily assembled defensive forces. The tactical mathematics looked grim. 4 exhausted paratroopers with limited ammunition against growing enemy pressure, ordered to hold a position that military common sense suggested they should abandon or deny. "Sarge, they're moving to cut us off from the south approach," Corporal Hayes called out, his voice tight with controlled fear. McNiece felt sweat mixing with cordite residue on his hands as he tracked German infantry through the hedgerows. Standard tactics for securing river crossings: contain defending forces, prevent demolition, hold the span for friendly exploitation. The enemy commander understood the tactical value of intact infrastructure and the urgency of securing it before Allied reinforcements could establish effective resistance. The TNT satchel pressed against his hip like a physical reminder of choices that couldn't be undone. Military training emphasized obedience to orders, but field experience taught harder lessons about situations where following commands might cost more lives than breaking them. McNiece closed his eyes and tried to calculate the human cost of various decisions, weighing his 4 men against strategic objectives that extended far beyond their immediate tactical situation. Radio static brought Lieutenant Morrison's voice. "McNiece, status report. Friendly armor is approaching your sector. Sir, German armor on site and infantry moving to secure the bridge. Request permission to execute demolition. Negative. Hold position and maintain bridge integrity." The contradiction felt like a physical blow. Hold against superior forces while preserving the target that represented their only tactical advantage. McNiece studied the approaching German infantry and felt something cold settle in his stomach. These weren't desperate troops fumbling through unfamiliar terrain. They moved with the confidence of veterans who understood their mission and possessed the resources to execute it successfully. Bielski appeared at McNiece's elbow, his face pale beneath accumulated grime. "They're bringing up more armor. I count at least 2 more tanks moving through the village." The sound of steel on stone echoed across the Norman countryside. Tracked vehicles grinding over cobblestones, their mechanical noise announcing the arrival of forces that could overwhelm any resistance McNiece's scattered squad might offer. The bridge beneath his feet vibrated slightly with each passing vehicle, a reminder that medieval engineering had never been designed to support modern warfare's massive mechanical loads. McNiece gripped the firing mechanism for the demolition charges and felt the weight of command settle like a physical burden. One decision would define his remaining minutes or hours, determining whether his men lived to see another Norman dawn or died defending a bridge that might fall to enemy forces regardless of their sacrifice. The moment McNiece's finger found the detonation switch, time seemed to crystallize around the weight of a decision no training manual had prepared him for. The German Panzer IV had positioned itself to rake the bridge approaches with machine gun fire, while infantry closed from 3 directions. Their movements coordinated with the precision of troops who understood the tactical value of river crossings. Behind McNiece, 4 exhausted paratroopers waited for orders that would determine whether they lived through the next 10 minutes. What the after-action reports would never record was the tremor in McNiece's hands as he gripped the switch, or the way his stomach clenched when he realized that following orders might kill every man under his command. The official citation would mention exemplary leadership under fire and tactical innovation in the face of superior enemy forces. But it would omit the moment when Sergeant Jake McNiece chose to disobey direct orders from his commanding officer. DiMarzio, Bielski, Hayes, get to the south end of the bridge and prepare to move fast, McNiece called out, his voice steadier than he felt inside. The TNT satchel represented weeks of careful preparation, explosives hoarded from misdropped supply crates, and sympathetic engineers who understood the value of redundant demolition capability. Each charge had been positioned with mathematical precision against the bridge's structural weak points, designed to bring down medieval stonework that had survived centuries of Norman weather and warfare. Radio static brought Lieutenant Morrison's voice one final time. McNiece, friendly armor is 2 clicks out. Do not, repeat, do not execute demolition. McNiece looked at the German forces closing on his position and made the calculation that would haunt his sleep for decades afterward. Allied armor 2 kilometers away meant nothing if German forces secured the bridge intact and used it to position their own tanks for devastating enfilade fire against approaching American columns. The tactical situation demanded immediate action, regardless of what officers sitting in rear command posts might prefer. "Sorry, sir," McNiece whispered, though he doubted anyone could hear him over the growing volume of German small arms fire. The detonation switch clicked with mechanical finality, sending electrical impulses racing through carefully laid cord toward charges that would rewrite the tactical situation in seconds. What followed existed beyond the reach of official language or military terminology, a sound like the earth splitting, followed by the peculiar silence that accompanies massive structural failure. Medieval stone, laid by craftsmen who had never imagined tanks or demolition charges, cracked and tumbled into the Douve River with thunderous splashes that sent waves across both banks. German machine gun fire slackened as enemy forces realized their primary objective had disappeared in clouds of dust and debris. But what McNiece would remember most clearly wasn't the sound of falling stone or the tactical success of denying enemy armor a critical crossing. Instead, he carried the memory of Private Hayes stumbling during their withdrawal, caught by shrapnel from a German mortar round that arrived seconds after the bridge collapse. The young paratrooper, barely 19 years old, from a farm somewhere in Iowa, bled out in a Norman hedgerow while McNiece applied pressure to wounds that military training couldn't heal. "Did we get them all out?" Hayes whispered, his voice growing faint as shock took hold. "Yeah, kid. We got them all out," McNiece lied, though German forces had secured most of their tactical objectives except the bridge itself. The official reports would emphasize the successful denial of a strategic river crossing, noting the tactical innovation and decisive leadership that prevented German armor from exploiting a critical gap in Allied defenses. They would omit the weight of command that settled in McNiece's chest like a physical burden, the knowledge that his decision to disobey orders had saved 3 men while failing to save the 4th. Years later, when civilian friends asked about his wartime service, McNiece would describe the successful demolitions and tactical victories while remaining silent about moments like these, when following military protocol might have killed everyone. But breaking it carried costs that extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations. 23 years after the Douve River, McNiece stood on a freight platform in Tulsa, watching a locomotive cross steel trestles that reminded him of medieval stonework built to outlast wars. The weight in his chest had never fully disappeared, though civilian life had taught him to carry it without outward sign. Sometimes the rumble of heavy machinery brought back the sound of German armor grinding through Norman villages, or the particular silence that followed massive explosions. The official citation hung framed in his garage, describing exceptional valor and tactical innovation under extreme combat conditions. Visitors admired the Bronze Star and asked about the war in Europe, expecting stories that matched the clean narrative of military decorations. McNiece usually deflected with humor about Norman mud and filthy 13 pranks, avoiding the weight of decisions that official language couldn't capture. Corporal Bielski had written twice since the war, Brief letters from Pittsburgh, where he worked construction and raised 3 children who would never fully understand what their father carried, from a June morning in 1944. DiMarzio sent Christmas cards for a few years before the correspondence faded into the silence that many veterans preferred. Only McNiece seemed unable to let go of moments that history had compressed into a few paragraphs of tactical summary. The freight train's whistle brought him back to the present, though part of his mind remained anchored to the weight of command and the tremor in his hands when he chose to disobey direct orders. Civilian supervisors occasionally noted his talent for improvised solutions and decisive action under pressure, unaware that these skills had been purchased with nights like the one when Private Hayes died in a Norman hedgerow. What the Bronze Star citation couldn't convey was the arithmetic of command, the way tactical decisions echoed through individual lives long after battles ended. McNiece had saved 3 men by destroying the bridge, but he carried the knowledge that different choices might have saved 4. Military mathematics dealt in acceptable losses and strategic objectives, while human memory focused on specific faces and particular moments when everything hinged on split-second decisions. The captured FN Minimi had disappeared into some quartermaster's inventory, probably listed as battlefield recovery, without notation of the desperate morning when it provided covering fire for a demolition that military protocol would have prevented. McNiece sometimes wondered if other soldiers had used the same weapon in subsequent actions, unaware of its role in a river crossing that never appeared in regimental histories. Lieutenant Morrison had been killed 3 weeks later during a patrol action near St. Vith, his death eliminating any possibility of official inquiry into McNiece's decision to execute unauthorized demolitions. The tactical situation had validated McNiece's choice. German armor never crossed the Douve at that point, but validation felt meaningless when measured against the weight of carrying such decisions for decades afterward. The locomotive's rumble faded into distance, leaving McNiece alone with memories that civilian life couldn't fully accommodate. He understood why so many veterans remained silent about certain aspects of their service, preferring official narratives to the messier truths about fear, improvisation, and the human cost of tactical decisions made under conditions no peacetime training could simulate. Walking back toward his truck, McNiece felt the familiar weight settle across his shoulders, not the burden of command, which had ended with his discharge, but the knowledge that some stories resist official telling. The Bronze Star represented one version of what happened at the Douve River Bridge, while his memory carried another version that included the tremor in his hands and the sound of Private Hayes asking if everyone made it out. Both versions were true, though only one appeared in military records. McNiece had learned to live with the contradiction, understanding that heroism looked different from the inside, messier, more frightening, and weighted with consequences that extended far beyond immediate tactical success. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.